Section 13 of Confessions, Volumes 1 and 2. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Confessions, Volumes 1 and 2, by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Anonymously translated. Section 13. My pleasing inquietudes became less wandering. I now had an object on which imagination could fix. I looked on myself as the work, the pupil, the friend, almost the lover of Madame de Warrens. The obliging things she had said, the caresses she had bestowed on me, the tender interest she seemed to take in everything that concerned me, those charming looks which seemed replete with love because they so powerfully inspired it, every consideration flattered my ideas during this journey, and furnished the most delicious reveries, which, no doubt, no fear of my future condition arose to embitter. In sending me to Turin, I thought they engaged to find me an agreeable subsistence there. Thus eased of every care, I passed lightly on, while young desires, enchanting hopes, and brilliant prospects employed my mind. Each object that presented itself seemed to insure my approaching felicity. I imagined that every house was filled with joyous festivity, the meadows resounded with sports and revelry, the rivers offered refreshing baths, delicious fish wantoned in these streams, and how delightful was it to ramble along the flowery banks. The trees were loaded with the choicest fruits, while their shade afforded the most charming and voluptuous retreats to happy lovers. The mountains abounded with milk and cream, peace and leisure, simplicity and joy mingled with the charm of going I knew not whither, and everything I saw carried to my heart some new cause for rapture. The grandeur, variety, and real beauty of the scene in some measure rendered the charm reasonable, in which vanity came in for its share. To go so young to Italy, view such an extent of country, and pursue the route of Hannibal over the Alps appeared a glory beyond my age. Add to all this our frequent and agreeable halts, with a good appetite and plenty to satisfy it, for in truth it was not worth while to be sparing. At Monsieur Sabrin's table, what I ate could scarce be missed. In the whole course of my life, I cannot recollect an interval more perfectly exempt from care than the 7 or 8 days I was passing from Annecy to Turin. As we were obliged to walk Madame Sabrin's pace, it rather appeared an agreeable jaunt than a fatiguing journey. There still remains the most pleasing impressions of it on my mind, and the idea of a pedestrian excursion, particularly among the mountains, has from this time seemed delightful. It was only in my happiest days that I travelled on foot, and ever with the most unbounded satisfaction. Afterwards, occupied with business and encumbered with baggage, I was forced to act the gentleman and employ a carriage, where care, embarrassment, and restraint were sure to be my companions, and instead of being delighted with the journey, I only wished to arrive at the place of destination. I was a long time at Paris, wishing to meet with two companions of similar dispositions, who would each agree to appropriate 50 guineas of his property and a year of his time to making the tour of Italy on foot, with no other attendants than a young fellow to carry our necessaries. I have met with many who seemed enchanted with the project, but considered it only as a visionary scheme, which served well enough to talk of, without any design of putting it in execution. One day, speaking with enthusiasm of this project to Diderot and Grimm, they gave in to the proposal with such warmth that I thought the matter concluded on, but it only turned out a journey on paper, in which Grimm thought nothing so pleasing as making Diderot commit a number of impieties, and shutting me up in the Inquisition for them instead of him. My regret at arriving so soon at Turin was compensated by the pleasure of viewing a large city, and the hope of figuring there in a conspicuous character, for my brain already began to be intoxicated with the fumes of ambition. My present situation appeared infinitely above that of an apprentice, and I was far from foreseeing how soon I should be much below it. Before I proceed, I ought to offer an excuse or justification to the reader for the great number of unentertaining particulars I am necessitated to repeat. In pursuance of the resolution I have formed to enter on this public exhibition of myself, it is necessary that nothing should bear the appearance of obscurity or concealment. I should be continually under the eye of the reader. He should be enabled to follow me in all the wanderings of my heart, through every intricacy of my adventures. He must find no void or chasm in my relation, nor lose sight of me an instant, lest he should find occasion to say, "What was he doing at this time?" and suspect me of not having dared to reveal the whole. I shall give sufficient scope to malignity in what I say. It is unnecessary I should furnish still more by my silence. My money was all gone, even that I had secretly received from Madame de Warrens. I had been so indiscreet as to divulge this secret, and my conductors had taken care to profit by it. Madame Sabran found means to deprive me of everything I had, even to a ribbon embroidered with silver, with which Madame de Warrens had adorned the hilt of my sword. This I regretted more than all the rest. Indeed, the sword itself would have gone the same way, had I been less obstinately bent on retaining it. They had, it is true, supported me during the journey, but left me nothing at the end of it, and I arrived at Turin without money, clothes, or linen, being precisely in the situation to owe to my merit alone the whole honor of that fortune I was about to acquire. I took care in the first place to deliver the letters I was charged with, and was presently conducted to the hospital of the catechumens to be instructed in that religion, for which in return I was to receive subsistence. On entering, I passed an iron barred gate, which was immediately double locked on me. This beginning was by no means calculated to give me a favorable opinion of my situation. I was then conducted to a large apartment, whose furniture consisted of a wooden altar at the farther end, on which was a large crucifix, and round it several indifferent chairs of the same materials. In this hall of audience were assembled 4 or 5 ill-looking banditti, my comrades in instruction, who would rather have been taken for trusty servants of the devil than candidates for the kingdom of heaven. 2 of these fellows were Sclavonians, but gave out they were African Jews, and, as they assured me, had run through Spain and Italy, embracing the Christian faith, and being baptized wherever they thought it worth their labor. Soon after they opened another iron gate, which divided a large balcony that overlooked a courtyard, and by this avenue entered our sister catechumens, who, like me, were going to be regenerated, not by baptism, but a solemn abjuration. A viler set of idle, dirty, abandoned harlots never disgraced any persuasion. One among them, however, appeared pretty and interesting. She might be about my own age, perhaps a year or 2 older, and had a pair of roguish eyes which frequently encountered mine. This was enough to inspire me with the desire of becoming acquainted with her, but she had been so strongly recommended to the care of the old governess of this respectable sisterhood, and was so narrowly watched by the pious missionary, who labored for her conversion with more zeal than diligence, that during the 2 months we remained together in this house, where she had already been 3, I found it absolutely impossible to exchange a word with her. She must have been extremely stupid, though she had not the appearance of it, for never was a longer course of instruction. The holy man could never bring her to a state of mind fit for abjuration. Meantime she became weary of her cloister, declaring that, Christian or not, she would stay there no longer, and they were obliged to take her at her word, lest she should grow refractory, and insist on departing as great a sinner as she came. This hopeful community were assembled in honor of the newcomer, when our guides made us a short exhortation. I was conjured to be obedient to the grace that heaven had bestowed on me. The rest were admonished to assist me with their prayers, and give me edification by their good example. Our virgins then retired to another apartment, and I was left to contemplate at leisure that wherein I found myself. The next morning we were again assembled for instruction. I now began to reflect, for the first time, on the step I was about to take, and the circumstances which had led me to it. I repeat, and shall perhaps repeat again, an assertion I have already advanced, and of whose truth I every day receive fresh conviction, which is, that if ever child received a reasonable and virtuous education, it was myself. Born in a family of unexceptionable morals, every lesson I received was replete with maxims of prudence and virtue. My father, though fond of gallantry, not only possessed distinguished probity, but much religion. In the world he appeared a man of pleasure, in his family he was a Christian, and implanted early in my mind those sentiments he felt the force of. My 3 aunts were women of virtue and piety, the 2 eldest were professed devotees, and the 3rd, who united all the graces of wit and good sense, was perhaps more truly religious than either, though with less ostentation. From the bosom of this amiable family I was transplanted to M. Lambercier's, a man dedicated to the ministry, who believed the doctrine he taught, and acted up to its precepts. He and his sister matured by their instructions those principles of judicious piety I had already imbibed, and the means employed by these worthy people were so well adapted to the effect they meant to produce, that so far from being fatigued, I scarce ever listened to their admonitions without finding myself sensibly affected, and forming resolutions to live virtuously, from which, except in moments of forgetfulness, I seldom swerved. At my uncle's, religion was far more tiresome, because they made it an employment. With my master I thought no more of it, though my sentiments continued the same. I had no companions to vitiate my morals. I became idle, careless, and obstinate, but my principles were not impaired. I possessed as much religion, therefore, as a child could be supposed capable of acquiring. Why should I now disguise my thoughts? I am persuaded I had more. In my childhood I was not a child. I felt, I thought as a man. As I advanced in years, I mingled with the ordinary class. In my infancy I was distinguished from it. I shall doubtless incur ridicule by thus modestly holding myself up for a prodigy. I am content. Let those who find themselves disposed to it laugh their fill. Afterward, let them find a child that at 6 years old is delighted, interested, affected with romances, even to the shedding floods of tears. I shall then feel my ridiculous vanity and acknowledge myself in an error. Thus, when I said we should not converse with children on religion, if we wished them ever to possess any, when I asserted they were incapable of communion with the Supreme Being, even in our confined degree, I drew my conclusions from general observation. I knew they were not applicable to particular instances. Find J. Rousseau of 6 years old, converse with them on religious subjects at 7, and I will be answerable that the experiment will be attended with no danger. End of Section 13. Recording by Martin Geeson in Hazelmere, Surrey.